This has stayed unwrapped for 11 years. Don't worry, I actually have read this trilogy. I just bought this after I finished the books borrowed from library, friends, etc. But with Sunrise on the Reaping's release date approaching us very, very soon, I wanted to do a reread of this trilogy. I guess first what we need to do is actually just unwrap this. I feel like I'm doing an unboxing, even though this is a very old purchase. These weren't the edition that I read. So we've got the Hunger Games. Oh, I was not expecting it to have that unremovable sticker. Then we have Catching Fire. Oh, they all have them. That's annoying. I actually bought these from Book Depository. That's how long ago it was. Couldn't I just put it on the box or something? I feel like it ruins the cover. Besides that, I quite like the cover. I'm gonna start, obviously, with the Hunger Games, and I will be updating this vlog with my reactions, my thoughts as I go through. Like I said, it's been a while since I visited these books, so I've actually forgotten a lot of the details that were in the books. So I'm excited to rediscover those parts. Okay, let's get to reading. I'd forgotten that Katniss tried to drown Buttercup, Prim's cat, which is actually kind of really intense if you think about it. It's like an offhand remark that she makes, but actively trying to drown a live animal to do what's necessary to survive, because it's not like she did it for the pleasure of it. She was thinking there's no way we can feed something else. But the fact that she was willing to do that, and the reason I'm thinking about it is obviously because this is a reread, and every sentence I'm reading, I'm thinking more about it than I was when I first picked up this book. I feel like I keep wanting to stop and talk about everything and annotate everything, but if I do that, I'll never finish this book. Annotating actually takes a lot of time and effort. The other thing is that I keep forgetting that Katniss is actually only 16, because Jennifer Lawrence doesn't look 16 at all in the movies. It was easy to forget just how young everyone is. I know the events that are about to come are just so traumatizing, and the fact that she was only 16 and that there were younger kids going through similar things. Wow, people really reduced the story to just a love triangle, didn't they? And I just reached the part where we are introduced to Madge for the first time. Madge is probably, I think, one of the biggest differences from the book and the movie that people are still talking about, or people kind of notice. I can't exactly remember why. I do know that she is the one who gives that pin to Katniss, but I feel like there must have been more to Madge and her role in the books that people still talk about it. But yeah, I guess I'll see once we read a little further. I've got that scene from the movie of the flashback where Peter throws Katniss the bread so vividly in my mind that I completely forgot that Katniss is meant to be 11 in that scene. Like, she is a child, and so is Peter. They are adults in my head, or at least old teenagers, because of the movie scene, and it's blowing me away just how young everyone is. And as predicted, I have definitely been over annotating. There are very few pages without them. I feel myself getting really locked into this book. I forgot just how good it is. It's really captivating, and I can definitely understand why past me 11 years ago rated this book 5 stars. I am still just as hooked on it now, even though I know what happens, even though I've seen the movie. We're not even at the games yet. I've just finished chapter 2. We're in chapter 3. I didn't end up filming any more updates yesterday, but I have a couple of notes on my notes app that I wanted to talk about. First off is that I forgot about Peter's father visiting Katniss before she gets sent off to the capital. Completely forgot about that. It's a really sweet scene, actually, him reassuring her that he's gonna look after Prim, and I think just generally the backstory of Peter. I understand that in the movies there wasn't really space and time to include stuff about his family, but I really like that extra context that we have, how his family dynamics were so different to Katniss's, just that whole part of it. It definitely gives Peter more depth as well, I think. Also, I remember Madge giving Katniss the pin of the Mockingjay, but I don't remember her urgency about wearing it in the arena, which makes me wonder whether she was actually part of the rebellion. It feels very pointed, and I don't remember if that was brought up later on in the books. I guess we'll see. Another thing, this section of the book had a lot of things to talk about, but I was reading it and I was really into it, so I didn't really want to stop and make an update. But another thing was when Katniss is talking to her mother, she tells her, you can't leave again, you have to be here. And it's interesting the way that Suzanne Collins depicts depression in this time, like grief and depression. They don't have the language in this world to describe that, and there's not much explicit talk about mental illness. But it was interesting kind of hearing Katniss's perspective on it and talking about how, yes, it might be a thing, but we can't really afford to do that right now, which it reminds me of, I saw a TikTok of someone who had a memoir published recently, and she was being interviewed, and she talked about how depression and anxiety are sort of like a privilege, like the labels are a privilege, which I understand what she means by that. I myself do struggle with a lot of mental health stuff, so I'm definitely not dismissing that or saying it's not real or anything like that at all, but I kind of understand what she means in that sometimes when something needs to be done, even when I'm crippled with anxiety or something like that, it's like a switch happens and it's like I just have to bury that part. And when you're in survival mode, you almost don't have time to be in the darkness until, you know, maybe you finally have a chance to breathe, and then it all kind of comes crashing down. But yeah, it was interesting in this book that her mother went through this when Katniss didn't understand that because she was in survival mode. It's also interesting because in the future, we know that Katniss is going to go through a lot of trauma. At the moment, she doesn't understand it, even though she has been through a lot now. She doesn't quite understand how her mother went through that or why her mother went through that. But later on, even though, you know, we don't, again, talk about these mental health issues in those terms, we know that Katniss does go through a lot of that later on. So it was like a couple of lines only, but I think it was really interesting because I definitely think it was a purposeful thing for Suzanne Collins to add, just looking at things like that in the context of survival and survival mode. And like I said, nothing I'm saying now is passing judgment on mental health issues because I've been through it. I think because I go through it, it's interesting seeing and hearing about different perspectives on the idea of labeling mental illnesses and going through mental illnesses. And my battery's about to die, so I'm going to quickly try to add this in. I forgot that Haymitch punches Peter. I'm up to this part now, so it's about like 69, 70 pages of the way through. But yeah, I completely forgot that Haymitch does that, and I'm just thinking about all the physical pain that Peter is put in before he actually gets into the games, like when Katniss pushes him and he hurts his hand. Yeah, because that's a lot bigger in the books than it was in the movie. I remember that. But yes, he does seem to have a lot of cuts and bruises even before he's officially in the games. So yeah, I'm going to keep reading now, but those are just all my updates I wrote in my notes app that I had from yesterday. Yeah, it's been a really good reread so far. I forgot just how enjoyable this book is, and I'm loving it. I cannot remember the last time I updated this. I'm at 200 pages now. It's still just as captivating as the first time I read it. I am hooked. Like, I am on the edge of my seat and I know what happens. All I want to do is just sit and read it. But unfortunately, uni started this week, so I'm busy with that. But honestly, like, I just want to sit and binge the whole trilogy. I forgot how good this is. No wonder I rated it 5 stars. I'm less than halfway through, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to rate it 5 stars again. And not just for nostalgia reasons. That was one of the things I was actually worried about. I was like, is it actually going to be as good as I remembered it being? So far, it is. It definitely is. It has been way too long since I've done an update, but I just got really into the story. I was reading late at night and then I just didn't have time to film an update, but I've written notes down. I'm just gonna try to go through them as succinctly as possible. For the Hunger Games, I actually don't remember where I last left off my update, but just based on my notes, I think we're well into the arena. The first thing I actually have listed is Katniss going deaf in one ear, which I forgot actually happened during the book. It does get fixed up later when she's back at the capital, but that was interesting because I definitely do remember Peter's leg amputation. I just didn't remember about Katniss, but it definitely was a huge disadvantage for her during the games, and I can't imagine just how intense and terrified you'd be to like have lost one side of your hearing, especially someone who relies so much on all your senses in terms of hunting. Also, there were a lot of moments in the book with Katniss kind of introspecting, ruminating. There were moments where Katniss
you can tell falls into a sort of depression, but because of the survival mode of the games, she has to really force herself to get out of it. And you can also see the PTSD manifesting as well, especially after Rue's death, which still hurts and hits as hard as it did the first time I read it. I knew it was coming, but it's still just so sad. And there is a line where she talks about the person that she killed, Marble, and she says that even in death he appears so vulnerable. This person that murdered someone that she was very fond of. It's the capital she hates for doing this to all of them. That was pretty sad to read. She reflects on the death a little later as well, and she's like, I don't know why I can't stop thinking about this, and then she realizes he's her first ever kill. Yeah, that's a lot. She's 16. It is actually pretty intense and horrifying when you really break it down like that. So there are some moments in this book as well where Peter and Katniss talk about Hamish's games. I forgot that his games was one of the quarter quells, so that was kind of interesting to read. Also just because this whole reread vlog is in preparation for Hamish's story to come out. I will touch more on that just a little bit later because I want to wrap up the Hunger Games review before I move on to Catching Fire. And Catching Fire touches on a lot more of Hamish's story. I did end up giving this 5 stars again. Honestly, it's just as good and intense and fast paced and just everything as I remembered. I was a little bit worried that it wouldn't live up to my memory of it. I knew it'd still be good, but I didn't know if it was going to be 5 stars, and it honestly still is. I think Suzanne Collins did an amazing job with this book. She doesn't shy away from the horrors, and the way she touches on things and then moves the story along, I think it's done with a lot of finesse. I don't know how to describe it, but there were just a lot of moments in this book where now it being a reread, I could really pick up on. She set a lot of foundation in this book without you even realizing it. And you kind of just like, you read it and you process it, but you don't really know it until later. And then you can look back at this and be like, wow, like everything was there. I think it was just really well paced, really well done. And it is an amazing first book to a series. And as you can see, there are quite a few annotations. I was basically annotating almost everything. I was trying to chill out with it, but there were just so many lines in here that I was like, wait, that's something that's intense. I need to write that down. Like little moments I completely forgotten about as well. Anyway, that is Hunger Games. And then I started reading Catching Fire the next day. I feel very locked into this series at the moment. I only started this, I started this 2 days ago, and because I've had uni as well, but I'm already up to 300 pages in, which for some people might be slow, but for me, given uni work and other things, I feel like I've actually read so much of this. I'm absolutely flying through it. The only thing is I forgot just how deep we get into the book before the games actually begin. There's more kind of thinking about Gale and Peter as well and her dynamics with both of them. You can definitely tell that she's like, it's like an annoyance for her. She'd rather be thinking about all these other things instead of the romance. Even in this book, I can see why she ends up choosing Peter. There are still a lot of parts in the book where she dwells a lot on Gale and who she could be with him and who she is with him, but you see the startings of like, Peter is just a good person. He creates goodness out of bad things, whereas Gale is about destroying things, destruction, and I don't know if it's because I know what happens at the end, but from that lens, I can definitely see where this is going and why it's like that and why she made the decision that she did. And I do know that people talk about, she didn't really choose Peter, but I don't think that's true. I think she has chosen Peter a lot, and it shows in this book. She definitely is not on the same level as Peter at the moment, but I think it's cool to kind of see her through that journey. And this is going to be spoilers for the 3rd book. It's not a good thing per se, but it sort of is good for their relationship that the whole brainwashing thing happens, because at the moment you can definitely see that he puts her on quite a high pedestal. So I'm glad. Again, glad is not the right word. It's good for the story, just for their relationship as well. The brainwashing puts them at a more even level, like a more even ground, I think, which ultimately helps their relationship. Those are just my musings on that at the moment, even though we're not up to that book yet. But again, because I know what happens, I'm applying that lens over my reread and interpreting the writing decisions that Suzanne Collins made in the book. Okay, and I started getting a little bit distracted, but I do have a bunch of notes. One thing is that I forgot about the victors' talents, like how they have to showcase a talent that they have, which seems like such a strange thing to have to do. I mean, they're one of the games, I don't know why they need to be shown as having some other skill, but I assume it's part of like the illusion of making these victors a sort of celebrity in a way. And then I forgot about how good Peter is actually at painting, and he's not just about baking and frosting bread. Also, because I rewatched this scene from the movie so many times of the District 11 part on the victory tour after Katniss does a speech, I completely forgot about how much more hidden the dissent and the shooting was in the books. The Peacekeepers definitely tried to hide that from the others. So like immediate and intense in the movie, and Katniss and Peter are like witnesses to it. So that was interesting. I bring that up because I feel like, I mean, it's a movie. I get that differences between books and movies are there for a reason. But yeah, everything's a lot more subdued and sneaky in the books, which does make more sense in terms of rebellions, uprisings, revolution. I also forgot about Madge bringing painkillers after Gale's whipping, but I guess that's expected. Madge just doesn't exist in the movies. I also, this is a big one, I think, but Katniss running into Bonnie and Twill, who are on the run from District 8 to District 13. That part completely 100% forgot about. I think with District 13, in my memory, just has it as Katniss only really finds that out at the end of Catching Fire, where she wakes up and Gale tells her. Completely forgot that in the books she runs into these people and she starts looking into the possible dissent and possible people in District 13 and that like theory, that rumor. So the first section of Catching Fire actually has so much going on. I just thought it was the victory tour stuff, like a little bit of their daily lives, the fake marriage, etc. But yeah, there's just so much more going on in here than I remembered. Also, the very sweet scene between Peter and Katniss, filling in her family's like books of plans. That was pretty sweet, and that was sort of the thing that sparked my thinking about Peter being, you know, he creates, he gives versus Gale, because she's like staring at him as he fills in this book and he like draws from nothing. And I think she sort of says that line as well, like he just kind of makes things from nothing. And I thought that was a really sweet moment between them. And there are a lot of these moments between Peter and Katniss, but she doesn't think of it romantically. Like she definitely has some sort of longing for him, but she doesn't quite understand it herself, but we as the audience can kind of figure it out. It is interesting seeing the dynamic between all of them and her relationship with both of them, especially since in the movies we don't get insight into Katniss's mind. So that's definitely a part of the books that I really enjoy. So all the notes I have on my phone, but I've read past that. What I'm up to now is she's on stage with Caesar Flickerman and her dress has just turned her into a Mockingjay. There's also a lot more confusion in the books for her, which I think is actually more realistic in terms of her not understanding why the victors are saying certain things, her not understanding the full depth of the people in the Capitol's unhappiness with this quarter quell being from the existing pool of victors, just how angry and betrayed the other victors feel, all of that. I like the fact that she's a little bit more in the dark about that and just to figure that out herself, because I feel like in the movies, obviously again, because we're not in Katniss's mind, she sort of has to already feel that or think that for us to understand it, or like she directly asks the questions to someone on screen so they can explain it to us. So yeah, I really do like that part of the book. Also, I love seeing Finnick again. I do really love him as a character. I was obsessed with Finnick and Annie for a long time after reading the books, and I probably, along with a lot of other people, I watched a lot of Annie and Finnick like little mini movies. I think there was like a group of people who made these. Also, I read a lot of fan fiction of Finnick and Annie as well. So it is fun to finally get to see him again. I will probably finish this very soon. I am going out tonight, so I won't be able to finish it for the rest of the day, but we're pretty close to the end now, and I know it's just only going to get more and more intense as we keep reading. I don't think I'm going to take too long to read the rest of this. I'm not excited to read the next part with Cinna though, because that always made me really sad. But yeah, we're only going to get more and more deaths very soon, so that is my very, very long update. I left way too much time in between filming the last one and this one and just had so much to say. But safe to say, the reread of the series is going really well. I'm loving these books just as much as I did back then. I'm picking up a lot more details and a lot more stuff that I forgot or didn't realize before. And yeah, hopefully I will be back for another update a lot sooner than this one.
I did forget to talk about some things. One, I forgot that Peter and Katniss both did their private training session, kind of a rebellious thing separately, like independently from each other. They didn't plan for that to happen and it just sort of did, which I don't know, I really like that. They were on the same page without even realizing it. The other thing is I also completely forgot about the little picnic day that Katniss and Peter had before the interview. That was really sweet. And yeah, I don't know, it's like a moment of peace between them. The last moment of peace I think that they have before they go into the games and then the brainwashing happens. It was really nice to read that and have that moment just be like locked in, especially because Peter does say, I wish I could freeze this moment in time. And to them at the moment, they know that they're not going to both come out alive. They both have different ideas of who it's going to be that comes out alive. But yeah, it was just such a bittersweet moment. That is some little things I wanted to say. I'm going back to reading now. I finished as expected. I did not film any more updates in between the last one and finishing this book. I've also actually started Mockingjay, but I will talk about that later. Back to Catching Fire. This is probably a solid 4.5 stars. I actually can't remember what I rated it last time I read it. I think it was around that. I definitely overall liked The Hunger Games more, I think, but I do remember really loving the movie of Catching Fire and just how everything started developing, coming together, and just the way the story went in Catching Fire. I remember definitely loving that. I think I maybe would have liked this more if the games part was longer, though I understand why that couldn't be, because then it would just be an exact replica of the Hunger Games. And I do really appreciate the setup of the first part of the book. I just really enjoyed the way that the games were designed with the clock, knowing more and learning more about Finnick and the other tributes. And yeah, I think I just really enjoyed that part a lot more than the first bit. So I was mostly looking forward to that. I also do really like the fact that there is way more development between Peter and Katniss in the books than in the movies. Even little moments of Peter and Haymitch being at Katniss's house when the peacekeepers are there, when she came back from the woods after the fence was turned back on, and just little conversations that Peter and Katniss have as well. I just think there are a lot more of that in the book. Oh, also, okay, I think I'm getting ahead of myself. I have these all in my notes. I was trying to do like an overall review of the book, but yeah, let's just break it down to the parts that I really wanted to take note of. So one of that is the scenes with Katniss and Peter, you know, with the family plant book, and just all of that. I really enjoyed those moments between them. And you get to see how Katniss really grows to know him as a person rather than just someone she was trying to help in the games and someone who's more than just the boy with the bread. Now onto my more specific notes. Okay, so the scene where Peter's heart stops with the force field. I've rewatched that scene from the movie so many times because I don't know why. I just really like watching it. I always still love the realization from Finnick that Katniss's care, I guess you could say, I wouldn't say love, maybe not yet, but just how much she actually cares for Peter is so much more obvious, and Finnick realizing that it wasn't all fake. I just really enjoy that. And I think also as well, Katniss breaking down, I think that's her own realization that she cares more for him than she realized or admitted to herself. I do like, obviously we can't get it in the books, but I do love the addition in the movies of Snow watching this scene and also coming to the realization that it is perhaps real. Like nothing else convinced him that she really cared for him except for this scene. And then his granddaughter was like, oh, someday I hope to find a love like that. Really liked the addition of that scene in the movies. Also, all the deaths in this book are so heartbreaking. They were already heartbreaking in the first movie, but it just feels even more senseless in this book. And it was also really heartbreaking and bittersweet with the District 6 woman jumping in front of the monkeys to save Peter. I understand why. Obviously, they were part of this rebellion and they needed to keep him alive for Katniss. But yeah, just the fact that she was so willing to give up her life for that and how a lot of them actually were willing to give up their lives for this cause. Also with the scene with District 6 person, it was just Peter comforting her and talking to her as she's dying. That just really showcases the type of person he is. And just like, yeah, I really do love Peter as a character. I think his goodness is exactly what makes him a great character in these books, because you're filled with so many people who are good people, but they're also willing to do whatever it takes to survive, like Katniss, right? Like there are moments, like in this book as well, there is a moment where she briefly thinks about ditching Peter to just run and get out alive. Obviously, she doesn't do that. I mean, that's how her instincts were honed in the circumstances that she was in. So you can't really blame her for that. And there's a scene between Finnegan and Katniss as well, talking about they are all victors, not by chance, for a reason, maybe except for Peter. So yeah, I think just having someone be good is a great, how do you say it? Like, it's good to be able to see that contrast between people in this type of book. Also, something that I noticed in the books, there are a lot of people who critique the books for making Katniss in the end have kids, which she's always been really adamant that she did not want to do that. But you can actually see throughout this book that this topic keeps getting revisited in Katniss's mind as well. Like, thinking about after the announcement of the baby, she thinks about whether other people also think about the sadness of having kids, them being in the games. And then a conversation with Peter, she mentions at the end that she starts imagining a world where there is no games and that someone like Peter's kid could survive. So I think Suzanne Collins is very deliberate with this topic. She brings it up, and slowly we get to see Katniss not change her mind, but actually start thinking that possibly there is a future where there isn't the games and the capital. Because before that, she can't think of that. Like, she wasn't like Gale thinking about what we could change or do because she didn't think there was any point. Now she's changing her mind, and that's shifting. So the idea of having kids is not because she didn't want kids, but because she didn't want kids in a world where they could just be taken away like that. So I think it really does make sense how it was handled and why she ended up having kids in the end, because she did end up contributing to making the world be a place where you can have kids safely. And I'm kind of jumping ahead. Obviously, I haven't finished Mockingjay yet, but because this is a reread, I'm thinking about what does happen in the end and how the stuff now is leading up to that. The last thing is that I remember the first time I read this, I was so confused by the end of the games and how that all sort of kind of like came about and how it all unraveled so quickly, because we are in Katniss's mind. She just got knocked out. She's confused. I'm confused. And I feel like I was confused even after it was revealed that all this stuff was happening. And I did actually end up looking on Reddit just to hear other people's thoughts on it. I'm glad I'm not the only one. And I know that some parts of Mockingjay does touch on some of the things that happened at the end of this book. And I honestly forgot just how quickly these games went. Like, there were only a couple of days in, 3 days actually to be exact, before everything happens, before it ends. So yeah, I think maybe a part of me was like, I wished it was a little longer. Like, so much happens in each day. Like, so many deaths happen, so many events happen that it feels so much longer. But like I said, I really, really enjoyed the setup of the games with the clock. I thought it was really creative, and I know that the book isn't about just the games, but I did really enjoy the setup, and I think that maybe that's why I wanted more of the games. So yeah, that is my review of Catching Fire. Like I said, I've started Mockingjay. I'm about 100 or so pages in. I remember thinking this book was a little bit more boring, like I think a lot of people did, but I think I'm appreciating a lot more for what it is now that I can kind of see it as a whole and I understand the implications of it. And I also feel like, because of how relevant it is in today's world, I can appreciate the book a lot more. At the moment, I'm not finding it boring. I don't know if I actually found it boring like when I first read it, but I definitely didn't enjoy the pace as much as the books with the actual games in it. But I think it's just about adjusting expectations and realizing that this trilogy is more than just the games. I was also going to read Ballads of Songbirds and Snakes for the first time in this reading vlog, but I'm hoping to post this video in a couple of days. I don't know if it's going to happen because I want it out before Hamish's story is published. I won't be able to do it in this vlog, but I will definitely get to it before I read Hamish's story. Also, Catching Fire had a lot about Hamish's story, which was interesting because I forgot that Peter and Katniss actually watched his games on the train. So we get a little glimpse of that. I am not looking forward to seeing the scenes with Maisie, I think that was her name, Katniss's mum's friend, because we, obviously see a little bit hear about that in the book already. And I know that's just going to be sad. Anyway, back to reading Mockingjay, and I'll be back with an update. In the book, she actually does acknowledge that the force field incident is what might have convinced Snow. I forgot about that because she says, "It seems under that hot pink sky with Peter's life in limbo, I finally did. And in doing so, I gave him the weapon he needed to break me." Finally did convince Snow. So yeah, this is the first time where I've actually cried tears. In other parts of the books, my eyes have sort of welled up and I've wanted to cry, but this is the first time like tears have actually fallen from my eyes. And it's the part where after the capital attack on 13, they're getting Katniss to try to film a propo to show that she's alive and well, and she sort of breaks down and just can't say anything. And Phoenix says she's figured out how Snow's using Peter. I don't know why, it's just so sad. I think because it's one of the first times, or one of the first and only times, that the emotions, the behaviors, the feelings that Katniss is going through is actually been given like a reason, a name. There are a lot of moments where she kind of just goes off her gut instinct, but she can't name the actual feelings that she's going through or why she's going through things, or if she does, she kind of like stops that immediately before she breaks down, which again is all part of the survival instinct. But I think this is one of the first times that she's just feeling and just letting it happen, and she knows exactly why that is. And yeah, I don't know, it's just sad. I think because again, I really liked Peter as a character, and I liked seeing how the relationship developed and how it changes over the books. It's very sad. So it turns out that the pin wasn't about rebellion, but was just about honoring Madge's auntie, Katniss's mum's best friend ages ago. Yeah, so that's what kind of was the start of it, and who knew that it would end up being the symbol for a whole rebellion. It's just sad that Madge didn't get to live to see that, and her family as well. I mean, that's just one of many casualties that I will now touch upon in this book. So I have finished Mockingjay now. It's been a couple of days actually, and wow, yeah, the younger me just did not appreciate this book for what it was. To be fair, I think reading it at that age is very different to reading it now. You just have a different perspective, you have more of an understanding of certain things, and yeah, it's not a bad thing at all, but it also does highlight how impactful rereads can be and just how much you can get from rereading a book, and probably why I should try to make more time for rereading. There's just so many new books being published all the time that it's hard. But yeah, I'm really glad I reread this whole trilogy. I originally rated this 3 stars. I actually rated Catching Fire 5 stars, which I completely forgot. My new rating for it is 4.5, which is totally fine. I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing that my rating lowered. I think it just didn't have the same 5-star feeling as Hunger Games, but it was still such an amazing book. This one I rated 3 and now I'm rating it 4 stars. I think the 3 stars was because I was a little bit bored maybe. I don't remember being super entertained by it, but reading it now I can really see the trauma that Katniss was going through, and the way that Suzanne Collins portrayed it I think was very good, and I really just enjoyed how she didn't shy away from that. I think in a lot of young adult dystopian novels or young adult novels where the protagonists are going through really intense events, but they don't really show them being affected by it that much. And I like the fact that that is such a huge part of these books, because I feel like it's unrealistic to have it any other way. I feel like some people, like me when I was younger, might think that that's a little bit boring, but I think what Suzanne Collins is trying to do with this book, having those parts in just really highlight exactly the points that she was trying to make. Katniss was 16, 17 by the end of the book, and she was going through intense trauma. And being a child or being a teenager, just not being an adult, doesn't exempt you from this kind of trauma. She's also so young and she's been thrown into this huge role and being expected to perform all the time, which is really insane to think about. Gale seemed to really grow into his role. He's been waiting to do this forever, but Candace never wanted to be a part of any of this. She just wanted to save her sister. I think in some way, like, she does want justice for her people and she wants the world to be a better place, but she didn't ask to be the face of a whole rebellion and everything that that came with. I really liked seeing those parts of it. Also, this book had a lot more details than I remembered it. I mean, I annotated it a lot as well, just like the other books. There was so much that I just completely forgot, and it was really cool. I don't know if that's the right word, but it was definitely fun picking up on those details, rereading these parts, and yeah, kind of putting it all together. I didn't film any other updates after my last one, even though I'd read a lot more, but that's because I just was really getting into it. That's the same with, I think, all of these books. I just didn't want to stop and keep updating when I just really wanted to keep reading, but I did make sure to write down notes so that I can talk about it now. I really enjoyed the dynamic between Hamish and Katniss, the hostility between them because of what happened with Peter at the end of Catching Fire. I really liked how that wasn't resolved immediately, but since the first book, they've always had some way of understanding each other that they can't even explain it really. Like they just get each other, probably because of how similar they are. But the part where Katniss really realizes what is being done to Peter is all because of her. And all these people are comforting her, but she doesn't want anyone else but Hamish, because she says that Hamish is the only one who really gets it, who understands, because he cared for Peter as well. Really enjoyed that part and just how their relationship changed from then. And I'm going to be saying, I forgot. Basically, everything I'm saying now is I forgot. But the part where Finnick tells his story about being used by the Capitol, I did remember parts of that, but honestly, I couldn't remember if it was only hinted at and then fan fiction kind of went wild with it. I just didn't remember what was canon and what wasn't. I forgot that he actually revealed all of this in one of the propos. Incredibly sad thinking about what happened to him. Anything to do with Finnick in this book is actually very sad for me, knowing how it's going to end, especially with him and Annie. I'm really still not over his death. I feel like I'm more affected by it than I am by Prim's death. In a way, Prim's death sort of felt like it made sense, and maybe I'm imagining that because I know that Suzanne Collins said in an interview that she always planned for Prim to die, but in terms of the way the story kind of wrapped up and the way it unfolded, it does make sense. Finnick's one, I feel like was so unnecessary. I know that it's to show the horrors of war and how casualties can just happen so instantly, but after everything he's been through, I really, really wish he was still alive. A little mini side note, Gale being suspicious of Finnick and Katniss and saying that men will do anything if they're desperate enough, like he isn't so caught up in his grief and his fear and his worries for Annie. Like, I just feel like it's just so weird to be thinking about that in these times, and I really, really hated that about Gale. And I also didn't like when he deliberately manipulated Katniss into kissing him at the house, and he acknowledges that as well. He displays a lot of toxic behavior, and look, I don't hate him as much as it feels like maybe a lot of people do. I just don't really care for him either. And all the times that he talked about the people at the Capitol deserve this, people who worked for the Capitol, even if they weren't Capitol citizens, deserved their fate. The prep team as well. I also forgot about the prep team being hung up and tortured, basically. His disdain for them, even though they don't know any better. I hated seeing all that. And I understand why he was like that, and I understand the purpose of his character. And look, I even honestly understand his point of view, but I just hated that because that's not what Katniss needed in that moment. In any of these moments actually, and it again really highlights how and why Peter was the right choice for her in the end. I do understand why people say that it almost feels like she wasn't given a choice because of what happened with the bombs and Prim, but honestly I think there are a lot of moments in the books before that shows that Katniss was already thinking of Peter and wanting Peter more. Also, not to make this all about romance, there is a scene later on where Katniss basically is like, you know what, I can survive without either of them. And you know what, that is very true. She can, and she has shown that she's able to. But I think Peter does add a light in her life that is wanted. Do you know what I mean? Like, you don't have to go through this grief and this pain and this healing alone. And Peter has his own things as well, but even if she didn't need either of them to survive, it is nice to know that she had that bit of sunshine in Peter. And I'm skipping ahead. I'm trying to do this in chronological order, but obviously a lot of parts of the books connect to each other, and I want to talk about it all, and my stream of consciousness just likes to jump around a little bit. That's a little bit of the end, a little bit of their relationship. The scene with Beatty and Gale talking about the bombs, that was also really hard to read, knowing what happens next. Also, the whole mentality of it is just kind of, it's a lot for me. With Beatty, I feel like, yeah, there isn't a lot of anger at him, but that's because I think just of the connection between Gale and Katniss and her family as well. Oh, speaking of, I hated the fact that when Gale leaves, he was like, oh, the only thing I had going was protecting your family, which I feel like, I don't know if it was meant to be that way. I thought he actually came to care for her family, not just doing it for Katniss's attentions and her favor. And I know there is a part of him that does care about them, obviously, but I just hated that he used that as a thing to be like, yeah, it's over for us. That was the only thing I had going for me. Prim just died. Katniss is mourning, and that's what you can say. I just couldn't understand why he didn't have any other words to say about Prim. besides that. And look, maybe it's because he knew there wasn't any point, and Candace didn't seem too mad about it. But yeah, it really rubbed me the wrong way. And then the last thing is that there are a couple of scenes, and this isn't really related to the story, but there are a couple of scenes where Hamish has to go like cold turkey sober, essentially. But can't that actually kill you? I'm not a doctor, but I have learned some things. And I think if you have a very high dependency on alcohol, going cold turkey on it could actually kill you. And that's why doctors use things like Valium and other things to slowly wean you off the alcohol. It's sort of like a necessary evil kind of thing. And then eventually you'll be completely sober. But I don't know, it just bothered me a little bit thinking about all those times that Hamish is forced to not drink any alcohol like immediately. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure that isn't actually possible or allowed, or it's just very unsafe. But yeah, I think that's the only thing that took me out of the story. Not a plot hole per se, just a little detail that I couldn't get over. And that is it. Those are all my notes. It has been a very successful reread. I don't think I've reread a book in so many years, and I'm so glad that I finally got to do this reread of the trilogy. I'm sad that I didn't get to add in the read for the first time of Ballads of Songbirds and Snakes, but I definitely want to get to that before I read Sunrise on the Reaping. And also, this video is a little late. I did want to have this done earlier, but yeah, just timing, scheduling, etc. just didn't end up happening. I really hope that you enjoyed this reread if you made it this far into the video. And if you haven't reread the series in a while, I highly recommend that you do. There was just so much to pick up on, to remember, to relearn about this series, and just so much to appreciate. That is it from me. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a comment or subscribe or both. That really helped me. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.